Hey folks, welcome to Project Gamma. At Project Gamma, we have smart conversations with smart people across entrepreneurship, technology, and cybersecurity. My name is Warner Moore. I'm a technologist and security leader who has helped build multiple business-to-business software as a service companies across industries. And I'm super passionate about cybersecurity practices. I'm also the founder of Gamma Force. At Gamma Force, we help tech and health tech companies with cybersecurity strategy through fractional executive services and execution as your fractional security organization. I'm excited to have James Campbell with us here today. James was educated as an architect and started his career as a crypto linguist in the military. That's not cryptocurrency. He's an engineering autodidact. And really, what motivated him to get into tech is that the tools sucked so bad when he was a linguist, he started fixing them. After the military, James got into SaaS before it was SaaS and started focusing in AI before Gen AI started trending. James' thing is solving problems that need solved as a CTO in tech companies. Right now, James's main thing is serving as an architect for his space startup, and he's helping out four other startups on the side, including his startup, Antibionic.io. So, James, we were talking about career paths preparing for this session. What's your origin story?
Yeah, so I stayed at enough Holiday Inns and here I am. No, I think I followed a pretty unique path. Like many of what you've heard of Silicon Valley famous people, I did not finish college. I went the military route though instead, right? I wasn't in my garage building something. I served the country. And the feeling of frustration, the feeling of that I thought that we were this advanced spy fortress. You see movies, and then you realize it's all duct taped together. So I would say I started helping upgrading the tape way back then, and then
Yeah, I
haven't
like that you're
stopped.
talking about that. I remember back in the 90s, I was hanging out with all the smart nerds. We were building the internet and figuring out how to keep the things we're building secure. And the NSA started recruiting people. My friends were getting recruited up. And I only know that story because I was there. I never hear anyone tell that story. But that's why we have really sophisticated intelligence capabilities now that no one knows about, except for the fact that Snowden shared some of those capabilities. So it sounds like you went to really improve some of our technology capabilities in the government. So good on you. So with tech companies, we've really always had a head start with remote working. And you were telling me during the pandemic, your company just went remote overnight, instantly went remote. Now our world's completely remote, at least most of the tech companies I'm working with. How do you make remote working effective in the companies you're helping build?
Yeah, I mean it's super tough. It's a tough topic to think about whenever you're transitioning, right? From you're used to seeing everyone in the office and then you're not, right? I think having something as part of your core values in terms of the communication strategies, right? So let's say Slack or let's say Teams, that's your async communication, right? You define it that way. And then the other two methods are, let's say email, right? Which, okay, don't ever send emails if you need to reach me, right? Because we only expect you to check emails every 24 hours, but you should be on Slack 24/7 or whatever, right? Whatever your policy is that you're setting at the company, make sure that's clear, make sure you follow it, right? Especially like if I'm a night owl, I could be pinging my team at 2 a.m., right? I want to make sure it's clear to them that I don't need a response right away, but I also want to get it out of my head so that I can go to bed. So, when they get in the morning, it's fine, right? It's not urgent, right? So that idea of urgency and everything sometimes get lost. The context gets lost remote, right? And so having that clear uh, guideline in place for how to remote work and how to communicate with your teams, right?
I
Super.
love 2 points you made there, like leaning into the tools, being intentional. Uh, that's how we work, and I think some people, some leaders think it just happens accidentally. You're either good at it or you're not. And being intentional is super important. And I also like how you talk about people who work different schedules, right? I work with folks around the world, and some team members are in different time zones here in the States. And I work weird times, but one of our company values is we put people first. And I don't want folks to have the cognitive load of thinking they have to be responsive at all hours of the day. So I schedule messages, and in my email, we default to Slack, but I still talk to the world through email. And in my email, it says, my schedule is irregular. Don't feel obligated from this message that I'm probably sending at 2 in the morning, right?
There you
So
go. Yeah.
are there any other like pointed tricks that you think are essential to your philosophy with remote work?
I mean, let the time zones work for you, right? So one of the startups that I'm helping out is co-founder is Yogan, which is an HR recruiting platform startup, right?
Mm.
And we end up having one of the best tech recruiters in Europe on the founding team, right? And so he's in Europe time zone, obviously, and so he loves actually. He tells us on Slack when we're going to bed, he's getting up and seeing the updates from the previous day and like reviewing things and doing his thing and adding his comments. So it works really well, and we just understand that it's going to be that type of flow, right? Um, and so it's hard to have core hours when you have a worldwide team, right?
Mhm.
Because you do 10 to 2. You're like, what? You can't do. No, that person's it's gonna be in the middle of the night, right? In Singapore, right? So, it has to use it as a positive thing, right? To get something done, to make sure that it's valuable when people are available and online, right? Being
Yeah, I
tr-
like
being
how you're talking about
transparent.
using time zones as tools.
Yeah.
The one further example of that, and I look at this as a luxury. I've always wanted to do this, but I think it's a certain point of scale. It's like even in modern tech companies where we built these super resilient automated capabilities, stuff breaks, right? So waking up in the middle of the night as an engineer because something's broken isn't fun. So I've wanted to do a follow the sun on call schedule
Mm,
with having a team in Australia, or at least that time zone, to
yeah.
help support that as well. And I work with folks in Europe right now, and time zones can be used as a tool too. So that's a really good point. So a lot of people don't know that Twitter has an or had maybe an API available for use, and you were building products with it. How are you using Twitter's API?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely dating myself, but back in 2009-ish, 8-ish, I think I made the first Twitter analytics dashboard for the US government. So for open source intelligence. And those were the fun days, right? And very similar to the Facebook graph search era, where it was completely open. You could do 3 degrees, 6 degrees Kevin Bacon in Facebook all day long via code and APIs, right? And Twitter was similarly just very, very open about all of that. And so, yeah, use that to my benefit. And I was very, very sad to see them turn on the developer community. Even though I get that, they need to make money as a business, but this has been going on the back and forth between opening up and then having all these apps and third-party apps and third-party clients for Twitter to closing it down and then opening it back up again. And then now they're charging for API access, which I think is great. They should have always charged for it. It's a business, right? It's useful, but it's kind of talking about the remote work versus it's the transition that's bad, right? It's like set something and that's how it should be. If you're going to have a free thing and people love it, it's very hard to then start charging for it, right?
Mm, yeah, yeah, That's very true. Monetization, right? If we're building a tech company and giving our thing away for free, like moving the cheese or suddenly telling all our customers they have to pay for something they got for free, and that's a good way to chase away a bunch of users.
Well, and just as a side note, that's why all the advice that I'm giving to all of the startups that I talk to these days is, if you're starting out with a SaaS company, do not no free, trial, but put in your credit card info, right? Because once they get used to free, it's very hard to upsell them to something that's not free.
Yeah, I do like freemium models, but it kind of depends. Like the business models vary so much between B2B and B2C. Like
Yes.
a lot of B2B plays, I'm going to want early users and have them help us iterate on product, providing market feedback. But even those
Oh
early
yeah, if you're
users,
doing
I'm
if
going to have letters of intent, and they're going to understand at what point it's going to become paid, right? It's not this infinitely free thing because
it's
we're giving them
it's
a ton of
that you're
value.
getting that feedback because it's still early in the product, right? So totally do the first 100 users, you get this code, but hey, in exchange, we're going to improve the product with your feedback,
Mhm.
right? And yes, at a certain point, you will be paid to, right? Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so true. With B2C, it can be difficult, or models, business models that look closer to B2C in the sense that you need a lot of scale to get profitability. Like those models are tough though, right? I think like they're easier to relate to, so in a lot of circles we talk about them more, but I tell you what, those kind of business models in tech, I've run the other direction
Well,
from
aren't
for the
those like
most part.
done? Like, how many more of those can even exist anyway? Like the network effects, there's only so many people and so many eyeballs, right? I think Facebook has hit the limit, Meta has hit the limit on that. So
Yeah, I agree. And leave those to the valley, right? That's what they've always been good at. I think in different parts of the country, here in Columbus, we say we're really good at B2B because we have so much industry represented here, tons of industry diversity. And I guess in DC Metro Nova, where you're at, you're probably the tech startups there are focusing on solving problems for the public sector and government. Yeah.
yeah, I'll definitely say, foundation, one of the ones that I'm helping with, it's predictive analytics. And I think what you find is, there are over 300 nonprofits around the DC area just in the category of consumer protection, right? And
Mhm.
they actually have money to spend on B2B type things, right? And you have so many consulting firms and you have so many, um, special interest type groups or NGOs and things like that. Despite whatever's happening with the current administration, this is always going to exist here, and they have money to spend, and they need tools, they need help, right? And so, apps like Foundation, we're getting a lot of interest on providing value doing AI enabled data analysis work, right? I think it's a growing field. And the DC flavor is going to be the DC flavor, right? It's let's say government tangential, right? But not
I
necessarily
like that.
full on public sector, right?
Government tangential. I might co-opt that. Yeah, I play around the country and world, right? CBUS is where it's at. I spend a ton of time here, but well, I'm a citizen of the internet, and there are no borders on the internet. And I've spent some time in DC's tech space, and it looks way different. I think in every area we have our competitive advantages and superpowers. Speaking of superpowers, you were doing AI before Gen AI was the new hotness. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I was at a startup called Primer. It still exists, so it makes it sound like it's dead. It's not dead, but they have definitely pivoted a few times since I left. Um, and their whole tagline back in 2019 was robots that read and write, right? And they had this whole slide on the intelligence gap, right? Way too much information is coming out every day, and humans are digesting this much, and how do we fill the gap, right? Let's use AI and robots, right? To analyze all that data, right? Similar theme, right? You hear all this now. And so back then it was all Bert
When was that?
20
When were you?
2019. Yeah, that's what, yeah.
Thanks.
And
So,
so
and for folks who don't realize, OpenAI became a thing in 2020. So,
that's right. Well, after, yeah, even after 2020, but yeah, OpenAI became a thing, but then LLMs really took off, what, like 3 years?
yeah, yeah, I should be fair. That's not OpenAI's timeline as an entity, but when Gen AI became the new hotness was 2020. So
Yeah.
you're doing Primer in 2019.
Yes, and that ended up being Project Maven work, which not government tangential directly with DoD at that point.
For those who don't know, what is Project Maven?
Yeah, and Project Maven, it became famous in the press back then because Google's employees protested against helping Project Maven at all, processing video from targeting data, tracking data from drones and things like that. At the time, it got a scary name in the press, right? But really, it was really the DoD's push to really start thinking about how to use AI to protect the United States.
Hmm.
And that's not really spin. Like, if you look at it, they really tried, right? And they brought in companies like Primer to showcase what they were doing, to see how they'd all plug and play together. You had everyone like Clarify that was doing facial recognition, plugging into Primer's NLP, named entity recognition pipeline on the text content. um it was a good effort at the time for what the DoD was trying to do, and I applauded them at the time. And I think there's so many lessons learned, and what happens with the DoD and with each administration is you get it's always on the shoulders of the next one, right? And so and sometimes you're like stepping back down a few steps, but you are moving forward and you are getting some lessons learned. You're getting some new tools out of it. You're getting some new projects, and they end up really helping the warfighter. So, and they help protecting the nation.
I like a point you made. It's easy for some parts of the country to miss this, especially when it comes to media. We have so much hyperbole and sensationalism, and like in the cybersecurity world of we call it fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I I actively avoid FUD and Gamma Force because we're solving problems strategically. We're not just responding in fear. And you were talking about solving problems, doing real work, uh, applying AI to solve problems that help us on a national scale. And uh, there's people in the world doing real things where there's all this noise around it. So I think it's important to get past the noise.
That's right. I mean, that would be a perfect segue to talk about Antibionic and my misinformation startup, anti-misinformation, to
Oh, love it.
identify the noise. 60% or whatever Twitter last year, before, the year before Elon took it over, were bots, right? And he's cut it down to probably 30%, right? But still, you can imagine if you're a consulting firm writing about Ukraine and they're evaluating what are people saying about Ukraine on Twitter, they're going to be quoting bots, right? Without something like Antibiotic, right? And so that's kind of the whole pitch in a nutshell for that, right? And everyone gets the idea of fake news nowadays. And so it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue to cut through that noise, and it affects everyone from my mom reading the news and watching it and believing something that's actually not true,
I think we all have stories of
right?
family members and that right now.
Yep. So that's why it's super important. And that's been my mission for a couple of years now, building out that platform. So
Yeah, that's super important work. Interesting to hear about. So, what are the things you were working on at one point? And I think this is pretty interesting. You were working on a dark web search engine, and we hear this jargon a lot, things like deep web and dark web, and deep web's just stuff that's further along the pages so folks won't look at it. And dark web's actually completely different internet protocols where things like Tor, where we're using more anonymous networks to share information. They're not indexed. Like Tor isn't in a Google. So you were building a search engine to search through something that typically isn't indexed. Tell us about that.
yeah, definitely. And this was kind of a right time, right place thing where, working at a larger government contractor at the time, when I was still getting my feet wet in tech and being self-taught and kind of still doing my analyst day job and things like that, nights and weekends. I was playing around with open source intelligence tooling and seeing what we can get from social media and things like that. How do we aggregate up, how many people are mentioning this term this week, right? That type of thing. And I had the opportunity to, one of my bosses at the time asked the question. He's like, James, it might be an oxymoron, but is there social media on the dark web? And I'm of course like, no. He's like, well, wait, maybe there is. You should have never asked that, because fast forward 2 years later, we're acquired twice. We turn into a product company overnight, and $100 million product, and it's still in use today, right?
Hmm.
By the government. And it was called Obscura at the time. And what I figured out was a way to use distributed hash tables, which is part of the core technology of how
Hmm.
the DNS distribution happens in Tor. Not to get too technical with this audience, but um, it spun out of the U.S. Navy in 2002, believe it or not. Amazing, amazing, amazing tech,
Hmm.
and truly a hidden service. Not only can you not find the IP, it's the protocol itself is set up that way, so you really can launch hidden services. Like, you would have to know about the thing if you wanted to use the thing, right? And just, I don't think they've ever really fully used that to its full potential even to today, right? And I won't talk too much about it, but let's just say I found some really cool ways to get the largest list of domains for Twitter and index it in the entire world. I did become Google for the dark web at a certain point. 80,000 domains at the time. I don't know what it is now. 80,000 domains. And we were 24/7. You have a every day the page could change, so you have to revisit the new page, right? Definitely a Google scale problem, right? And so you can imagine I was running it on a bare metal server, right? At the time, I have a whole bunch of horror stories from back then that we can talk about another time, but
That's
very,
a great
very fun.
LinkedIn headline. I built Google for the dark web. We use these scary words like dark web and these protocols like Tor, these privacy and anonymization protocols are useful and important. They're
So
solving
useful.
real
So useful.
problems that we
Yes.
need and want solved. And that's true of cryptography as well. Symmetric and asymmetric encryption. It's one of the few things that we have to protect us in our use, even in the private sector, of technology on the internet, protecting our information. So these tools are important and useful, and not only for things that involve scary words.
Well, and cryptography needs to improve over time too, and get harder and harder, right? Post quantum and all those things.
Yeah.
And I'll even say, I would like to think it attributed to me because I was on the Tor listserv, right? If you remember listserv days where you had
Mm,
emailers and
I
everything,
ran a few.
updates.
I favored Major Domo, love or hate it, but
So they went from 16 character domains on Tor to 32, and they did that, I think, because of the way that I was exploiting the permutations of those domains. Let's just say that. And they were trying to stay one step ahead, right? So I see all these things as like a cat and mouse game, but we're constantly improving security because of that, right? And you should
mm.
actively red team those things, right? And figure out, well, wait, someone like James figured this out. What are we going to do about this?
I live in the applied world, and well, as cybersecurity is my profession, so I pay attention to things, and technology is a part of my life, right? So I pay attention to things like how quantum computing is evolving, but I still look at it as very academic, and we talk about it in security circles, and it will be a factor at some point, because right now AES, because of our physics. The amount of energy that it would take to break AES is such a big number. I can't even name it. Think millions or billions of years. So AES for symmetric encryption with a good key. I trust. I trust that. Now, maybe it's flawed and we figured that out eventually, but unlikely. Now,
Yeah.
quantum computing is going to change that. And maybe this isn't part of your background, and if so, we can move on. But I'm curious if you have thoughts on quantum computing and how it might affect some of the things we're doing.
Well, we're talking about noise, right? And we're talking about stories that people tell and stories you hear in the press and things like that. And I really think you're going to see in the next few years, and I'm making a prediction. So be trigger warning or whatever warning. I don't know what warning, future person warning. That James might be wrong in the future. It's fine.
Statistically likely.
Thank you. It's just much
Humans
better.
aren't very good at future telling.
Everything's Bayesian, right? It's fine. And so um, you're gonna see the scare stories coming out about our ATMs could be hacked tomorrow because they're using outdated crypto. They're using outdated security protocols. They're using, something that's weak cryptography. And I think what you said about the academic exercise right now, sure, can a quantum computer break that randomly out of what it's trying to do? If you give it that task to do it, it's astronomical that it's going to be able to do that. But yes, there is a chance that it could do that, right? Tomorrow, or it could be a billion years from now. It will like
Mhm.
the bit will flip, from it's a tri-state to the state that
So yeah, it's not like hashing
yeah,
algorithms.
it's not like a brute force thing, right? So it's like
Yeah.
if it decides to, sure, cool. So um I think that the most important thing that's coming out of the quantum space, and I have a one of my people that's helping me on Antibionic. He's actually at IBM in quantum computing right now up in Boston, and so he's given me a little bit of this knowledge. He's talked about it at least, and the coolest thing is the entanglement with data and instant transfers, right? And that may become practical in the next 2 or 3 years, which is
Some of
super
the
cool.
study, this isn't my space, but I catch some of it. Some of the studies with entanglement and effectively teleportation of matter. There's
Yeah.
a really interesting work being done in that space right now.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to wind us down, but I'm going to, I want to have this part of the conversation before we do, because I think it's very interesting. I think it's very relatable. I mean, for me, a part of the reason why my career is focused in tech companies is because I was entrepreneurial. I wanted to be on the bleeding edge of technology. Started in the early days of the internet to .com companies to B2B SaaS, and now we're doing Gen AI stuff, right? It's their tech's moving fast, and at a certain point, I understand you got tired of being an employee and decided to be a co-founder. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, and it's definitely related to talking about Obscura and the dark web search engine. I had such a tough lesson learned there because I made so much value for that company and then the other two companies that acquired it one after the other. And I had barely golden handcuffs to stay and no piece of it, right? And it literally was me building the thing. I didn't even have a team, right? And I said, never again, never again. And I forced myself to learn how to not be so naive and get more of a business mindset, right? Because sometimes you get so stuck on the tech and the excitedness of building something new and solving a problem that it's easy to forget, hey, I should also make money on this thing, right? And it could be a going concern, and hey, this is my thing, I need to protect it because someone is going to just git clone the repo and run the same thing over again, right? Which again, I love the open source community. I have 10 Python packages I maintain out there in the world, right? Totally for it, but there's a time and a place, right? You also need to make money on the cool things you're building, right? And so I just have had that mindset since, and very painful lessons learned, right?
Yeah, there are two sides to that coin, right? If I'm talking to career professional and something that comes up often as opportunity cost of working at a startup. And my take with that is there shouldn't be opportunity cost. If somebody is, as a career professional working with this startup, they should be getting close to a market rate salary. And we can break that down, but I think that's a good rule. And on the flip side, when I'm talking with founders, I think that depending on how experienced someone is at as a founder, it's easy to look at equity as a way to get free labor. Well, I want to pay people as a founder.
Yeah.
So I equity is important and a piece of a compensation package. And frequently I want to allocate up to 20% of a cap table to early employees and key people.
Yep.
But I want to pay people first. So I think we can compromise ourselves on both sides of the table. And it's important to look at it as it should be a win-win. So if somebody is an early team member and they're building the product that we take
Yeah.
to market,
Yeah.
equity should be part of that
Yeah.
conversation.
And I think as leaders, um, and later stage career people, it should be on us to educate those people on their options and what it means
Oh,
equity.
I agree.
Because when I was their age or at their point in their career, I had no clue, obviously, right? And I didn't know I should have asked for a percent of every sale for the dark web search engine or whatever, right? So, instead of just giving them, here's an option for low salary and here's high equity, mid salary, mid equity, what the equity means and why, right? And how important that is, right? And why, how much value you're adding to the company that we even decided to give you equity. You know what I mean? It's huge. So,
Yeah, a couple times in my career. Once when I was serving as a leader helping build a startup, I built a narrative and an explanation about what the value of equity was from an employee perspective. And the real, because as an employee, they should look at it as worthless, but the value and the formulas that tie to that, there are real things there. And then later, I was serving as an entrepreneur in residence, working with a venture capital firm. And I was educating early stage founders on the same thing. I built out a spreadsheet and it showed how that equity would look at different inflection points of a startup, potential transactions. And for someone who is playing in that space where equity is a part of the world that they're living, being ignorant is to no one's benefit. And I think a key point here, and we don't talk about this enough, is, it's easy to get in the details and be like, how do I win? How do I schedule or how do I create the agreement or the context where I can win? Well, the thing is, these are really complicated things. Cap tables, different stakeholders who have influence, founders, investors, um, operating agreements. And there's always a way to screw someone. Always. And we have this mythology when people think about companies and startups, they're like, I have 51%. 51% is meaningless. It's really how the stock is structured. And well, we've gotten smarter about that. Certain tech companies, I think it started with Google. Zuckerberg did it, where there are different classes of stock, and they kept voting rights in the founders after going public. So we can be creative. One could argue that's a way of screwing the public market because we, assuming we're the public,
yep,
just gave this startup a bunch of money, but they keep control. So,
yep.
point here, there is no win or lose. If we're working with sketchy people or we don't have an understanding, sketchy people are going to be sketch. So
No, that's fair. And paper,
everybody can win, but
yeah,
we have to work with the right folks who share those values.
yeah. It gets back to, I mean, everyone knows this. The founding team, your first 10 employees are the most critical people you're ever going to hire. And it could make or break the startup. I mean, it's insane. So
And I have countless stories like that too in my career where I didn't work out as favorably as I should have given the circumstance. And I've walked away from a lot of things because it just isn't worth the cognitive load or the stress. And I'm going to build new and better, and it's going to be more successful. So, but I know who not to work with anymore. But I take those lessons, and I'm very selective of who and how I work with people now. So it's I look at those hard lessons as gifts, as opposed to something to be upset about.
oh, totally. I mean, a lesson learned is it's only useful if you apply it for the future, right? So you take them and apply them for the future.
Well, I want to thank you for being here today, James. I know that at some point, thinking back to our conversation, there might be this thought where you're like, man, I should have shared that with the audience. So consider that now. What are your closing thoughts for the audience? Any things about the four startups you're helping with that you want to share, or any books or reference information that you think would be helpful?
Yeah, I think number one, especially for your audience, is get to the space symposium if you can. That's going to be coming up in Colorado Springs. There's $5 trillion going into space in the next 5 years. No joke. That's probably less than what's actually going into space. You're going to have garbage removal in space, hotels in space. This is coming. There are funded startups doing these things right now. Part of the reason why I joined a space startup as solutions is because skating to where the puck is going, right? And I don't know what it says about the planet if we're all trying to get off the planet, but so that's one thing. And then the other two things, there's two books that I definitely recommend, and they're your usual, you know, books that you mention at parties to sound smart, So I would say the Four Agreements. And I don't know if you've heard of that, Warner, but the Four Agreements, it changed the way that I view relationships with my wife, with my family, with friends, and with business colleagues. It is so, so, so good. Sage advice, timeless advice, and written in a way that's not like new agey, It's really good. The other one is Human Compatible. Human Compatible by Stewart Russell. Anyone who is working with AI, anyone who is even thinking of integrating AI into their business, their startup, read this book. It's an easy read. He covers, anything you read on X, anything you read, someone pontificating on Medium, giving their thoughts on what they think AI is going to be. He's already thought about it. He's already taken all three or four sides on that thing, wrote about it scientifically, and then leaves you to think about it. Doesn't draw a conclusion, right? He gives you material to then have the knowledge yourself about it, to speak competently about it to other people. It's huge, right? And it's so hard to do when you're writing a book like that, right? Those are the two big recommendations. So thank you for asking.
All right, awesome. Well, I appreciate your time here, James, and thank you all for listening to Project Gamma, presented by GammaForce.io. Check us out on your favorite podcast platform to catch future episodes.
Thanks a lot.